The Toronto Maple Leafs have had a very interesting offseason already. The Mitch Marner rumors continue. They've re-signed some key free agents and should be active once free agency gets underway this week. David Morassutti of Locked On Leafs is here to talk about that and more next on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Leafs, David Morassutti. And David, wow, what a week this is going to be and has been so far for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's start with the whole Mitch Marner situation because it got a little crazy, let's say, during the draft. Rumors about a possible trade to Vegas, rumors about accusations of tampering. What's going on and where do we stand as of right now?
Yeah, it was kind of out of nowhere that you see Elliot Friedman, Darren Dreger both say that, the Leafs had discussed a sign and trade with Vegas because we know that Vegas was among one of the favorites to be a destination for Mitch Marner heading into free agency. I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Marner's not going to be returning to Toronto. He is going to be looking at alternatives in free agency. So obviously there was, people were saying, could the Leafs try to get something back from Marner? And, if you're Vegas, yeah, let's try to get Marner locked in before, July 1. Let's make sure no other teams get a chance to throw an offer at him. And then things took a little bit of a turn because Elliot Friedman brought up that, part of the reason Leafs were doing this is if Marner were to go to Vegas, there's a possibility that they could file tampering charges against Vegas. And this is an interesting one because it's not often that we know tampering happens. We know tampering. That's why they did the whole legal free, 48-hour window for free agents to go and look around and sign with team and no, not sign, just have those conversations. But we know that conversations are usually always happening. And in the Leafs case, I think there's some frustration here because they had discussed potentially doing a deal with Vegas last offseason. They threw in, hey, would Shea Theodore get it done? And Vegas is like, no, we kind of like Shea Theodore. And they ended up signing him for a long-term deal. And I wonder if the Leafs thought twofold of this. One, does Vegas have this belief of, why would we trade a significant part of our roster if we feel we can get Mitch Marner a year from now in free agency? And Marner has a no movement clause. And I'm sure the Leafs went to Marner and say, if we were to go and make a deal, would you waive your no movement clause? And I'm sure the agent probably said, yeah, you know what, Vegas, we would probably do Vegas. So I think the Leafs are probably looking at this like, yeah, we're not going to let Vegas just get away with, taking our best player when it probably looked like that was something that had already kind of been in the works a little bit here. It's tough, to prove that, obviously, but I think you're not throwing out the T word if you don't think you have a case, right? Or potentially have a case to grieve. So Vegas now has to be very careful with this. And the agent for Mitch Marner also has to be careful because if anything looks fishy, the NHL has made it known, and they told teams a few days ago, if you tamper, this is what you face. So that's something that I think is important here. That the league has already said this is what could happen if you are caught tampering.
So, well, first of all, what will happen if you are caught tampering? What is this?
Yeah, I think at a team level, the punishment can be, I think the fine is up to $5 million. Sometimes the contract could be terminated and unvoided. Depending on how serious they deem it is, you could forfeit draft picks, and the Leafs could get draft picks from Vegas, and the players can also be penalized too. It's not just the league. The league could say, all right, we're going to let you keep the contract, but guess what? You're going to face a fine, or you could be suspended. Now, depending on how serious it is, there is the possibility that a team could lose the player. Like the player could be expelled from the league. Again, that's a serious case. I don't think we're at that point. Like, I don't think Mitch Marner, that would probably have to be like Mitch Marner had already come to an agreement with Vegas well before free agency. And again, you have to prove that that's happened. This is where like communication with the agent and the team would have to be revealed. So yeah, this is a very delicate situation. And if the league is serious about cracking down on this, man, it could be a pretty interesting wrinkle. Maybe also, and as Elliot Friedman put it, a chance for the league to send a bit of a message. Like they don't want to find teams tampering. They don't want teams to tamper. But if there is that going on, they want to make someone an example.
Would you think that puts some pressure on Vegas to get a deal done?
I think so. I mean, if you're Vegas, if you go out and you sign Mitch Marner, and it's going to be, I think the reports were saying maybe it could be at $12 million a year. You can't afford that right now. You need to make a deal to free up space. Now, there's the rumblings that Alex Pietrangelo could be not able to play, and that's how they're gonna make some space. But the Vegas has to make, if they want to replace Pietrangelo and add Marner into the fold, they're gonna have to make some moves to clear cap space. That's why the sign and trade was brought up. A guy like Nicholas Roy, who makes I think $3 million the next 2 years. That's a luxury for Vegas to have a player like that in their bottom six. That $3 million could be better used for them to go and sign a guy like Mitch Marner.
The draft passed right now. Toronto did not have a first-round pick, but they did have second and third-round picks. Any of the players selected in the draft stand out to you?
I think I wouldn't say a specific player stood out, but it was clear what the Leafs' intentions were with this draft. And it's the first draft with Mark Leach, who was brought over from the Dallas Stars. This was his first one ever. And every single player is over 6 feet. Every single one. There's only one player that's under 6'3". Everything else 6'3" and up. So it's clear size was an important factor. And the Leafs only took one defenseman. Now, they didn't have a lot of high picks, but they made it clear that they wanted to go out and get size. And there's a few guys who are viewed as projects. When you're the Leafs and you don't have high picks, these are you take shots in the dark and hope you turn something into, nothing into something, as some would say. So I think, the fact that size was a big one for them, and they want to go with a different path than what they've done before, because the draft has not been too kind for Leafs. Yes, they have gotten great players like the Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylanders of the world, but those are guys that were picked in the top 10. You as an organization need to find ways to make it outside of the first round be something that you can be proud of and see some results in how you build your team going forward.
Free agency coming up. The Maple Leafs took care of two of their own free agents already. What else do you expect to happen? And talk to me about the impact of those two signings, first of all.
Yeah, first off, John Tavares and Matthew Knies. I think this is one of the few times where it's almost 99% of Leafs fans are ecstatic about these contracts, because John Tavares, getting him at under $5 million, at $4.38 million a year over the next 4 years, that's a big win for Toronto, because he's still a productive player. Obviously, he's getting into the older part of his career, so you can't be expecting to pay him what he was getting before. So he took, and he said, I probably left money on the table, but he wasn't complaining about it. And I think that's something that Leafs fans really appreciate. Then you get Matthew Knies, your emerging young, talented forward. You got him for the next 6 years, and you got him at $7.75 million. Like, considering what we were hearing throughout the year, a lot of analysts are saying, yeah, this is something that's going to cost the Leafs 8, 9, maybe even 10 million, depending on where they think this is going. And I'm sure a lot of fans would like to get the full 8-year term, but to get him for 6, you get this guy locked up at his best years at a really reasonable number. It not only helps you going into free agency to know what these guys are making, but to know that you've got important parts of your team not only coming back, but at numbers that you can easily say, this works for us. Now we can go out and add. And adding is not going to be easy because the targets that they have are going to be a bit ambitious. Brad Marchand is like the number one guy right now. Everyone, it's funny. If you told me a few years ago that Brad Marchand would be a number one target, not only for the Leafs front office, but for the fan base, somebody might give me a few harsh words. But that's kind of where things are right now. They got decent cap space to go out and get a Marchand, but they're going to have some competition for him, especially from Florida, and apparently Boston has thrown their ring in a little bit. But the Leafs, there should be a little bit of hope that they can do things a little differently. Obviously, letting Mitch Marner allowed this to happen. You have to kind of replace him in some way. You're not going to replace him with one player, but maybe you can get a few guys that can help contribute.
Going to be an interesting week in Toronto. David, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube at Locked On Leafs. You can follow myself on X at @D_Morassutti, 2 S's, 2 T's. And you can also follow my co-host Mike DeSeva at Mickey_Canuck.
All right, David, thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to get started today.